Hey everybody, how's it going? Okay, so welcome to the rotational torque training. This is something that I've been putting together for a while now, and I wanted to just take this opportunity before you start getting too deep into things, just to talk to you about what torque actually is. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into maths or into physics or whatever, but I just want to very briefly explain to you why we should do rotational torque training. Now, as you know, the gait cycle, the way that we move, the way that we propel ourselves forwards is locomotion, human locomotion. Now that gait cycle itself is a rotational movement. Now, if you think of the torso as the main part of that rotation, and you know, you've heard me talk about this at great length, the torso has to rotate. That generates force, that generates torque, because there's rotation around a pivot point. Now, as we rotate our torso, we also have our hip higher up, and that in itself creates rotational torque around another axis, around another plane of motion. And at the same time as the torso is rotating, the pelvis is lifting, the standing leg is also rotating, or should be rotating inwards, internally rotating. And again, that is another plane of motion where the leg is coming backwards in the sagittal plane, but it's also rotating within its hip socket. And the head of the femur in the acetabulum, it rotates as the leg travels backwards, and also as the leg travels forwards, because we have to think of the other side as well. So gait in itself is a real, true, multi-directional, multi-plane torque force. And we need to be able to control those forces with ease, basically, because we don't have time when we're producing 180 steps per minute or thereabouts. Obviously, sprinters go a little bit faster with their leg cadence, quite a lot faster actually, and also they're producing more power, so there's more torque forces there. So they need to be able to control those torque forces much more than endurance runners. But that's not to say that endurance runners don't need to control those forces, because they obviously do. And the better we get at controlling all of those torque forces that really go around the pelvis, that's why I put the utmost importance on the pelvis and of the core rotational musculature. And that's, when I talk about core, that's everything that connects to the pelvis. As far as I'm concerned, and as far as the Sling method is concerned, is a core muscle. So we need to work in all three planes of motion as much as possible, and controlling those torque forces through the pelvis. And this rotational torque training section of the Sling method is really where you're going to learn how to control torque forces a lot more. Now, everything up until this point has been slightly more linear in the way of pushing and pulling. That's not to say that there isn't any torque generated, because there is. Obviously, any time where the torso is rotating, any time where you're locomoting in a forward direction, you are essentially creating torque, and you're having to control those forces. But now we're going to kind of up the ante a little bit, and we're going to bring in a hit kind of a portion of this section of the Sling method. Now, this is separated into three sections. I would suggest that you always go through the runner's rehab, the basic 8, and then on to the next parts of the Sling method, but always go from the runner's rehab to the basic 8, and then on from there. So the runner's rehab and the basic 8 really does teach you on a fundamental basis how to control your pelvis, how to get out of an anterior or a fixed anterior pelvic tilt, how to get out of a fixed externally rotated hip positioning, and really bring yourself back to a neutral biomechanical position. So please make sure that you have worked your way through the runner's rehab and the basic 8 before you get to the rotational torque training. I will leave it there for the moment, and as we go through, you'll feel the intensity build up. The first section, the first 8 exercises, are all about stability rotational torque training, and there we go. We'll move on from there. All right, see you in there. Bye.